You've probably seen this image floating around the internet the past few days. It seems to have taken the broader nutrition world by storm, whether it's carnivore, keto, or anybody else. Administration officials in the capital released some, we'll call them new guidelines, about what constitutes what they think is healthy eating and what are healthy foods. And I don't know about you, but when I'm looking for health information and advice, the first place I always look are to politicians and bureaucrats. This chart is incredible. It represents the very pinnacle of the worst ideas we've seen promulgated since the time of Ansel Keys in the United States. And as America goes, so goes the rest of the world when it comes to nutrition. USDA guidelines are pretty much mirrored almost everywhere else, it seems like, at least in those countries that have the best relationship with us. So let me go over this. I mean, again, you've probably seen this, but I'm going to direct your attention here. There are some expected things at the top, right? If you are big on fruit, you'll find that you'll believe things like watermelon and kale are great for you, and so of course they made the list. Eat as much of that as you want, despite the fact that watermelon is sugar, water, and not a whole lot of anything else. And that kale is pretty much just a big leafy piece of oxalate. That's all it is. But right after that, frosted mini wheats. Look, back when I was a carb eater like everybody else, I loved frosted mini wheats. They were one of my go-to cereals. If I was going to eat that garbage, I would eat that stuff. It was amazing because it was sugar-coated carbs. Here, have some more carbs with your carbs, right? It's basically candy for breakfast. But because it's got a bunch of fiber in it, it's considered, a sensible option. And then we go down and you got unsweetened almond milk, which is also garbage. Non-fat frozen yogurt. Just go down the list here. I mean, you got Honey Nut Cheerios, orange juice with calcium added, which isn't good stuff. I mean, orange juice, what it does to people's blood sugar is just horrific. You go down this list, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And then what's at the very bottom? The foods we should avoid. A whole egg fried in butter. Okay, so you have a legit superfood, eggs, and another legit superfood, butter, cooked together, and you're not supposed to eat those. It is one of the worst things you could have. Only slightly better for you than cheddar cheese. Now, aged cheddar cheese isn't bad. Organic raw cheese isn't bad. The cheap cheddar cheese you find at your local grocery store in the generic packaging, that stuff is probably not great for you, but it should be well higher on this list. It should be in the green zone, not in the red zone here. And at the bottom, we get ground beef, pure protein, pure fat. But of course, it's at the bottom of the list because saturated fat is bad for you. That's what we're told. Despite the fact that literally authoritative health sources now are saying that they may have been wrong about saturated fat. They're telling us that saturated fat might not actually be that bad for us, and they're re-examining their guidelines accordingly. We're starting to see ketogenic diets, low-carb diets, anything from low-carb to zero-carb, starting to get recommended by actual medical professionals to address a whole range of problems. Why is that? Because they know they got saturated fat wrong, and they know that if foods spike your blood sugar or cause an insulin response when you consume them, they're probably not something you should be giving to people if you're trying to prevent them from getting diabetes or if they have full-blown diabetes. They know this now. They're just trying to figure out a way to not destroy their credibility as they literally start giving advice that's the polar opposite of what they gave a few years before. So when they give that these are apparently going to be given out in September at a White House conference on nutrition. Again, politicians are not where I look to for my nutrition advice. They've caused more harm than good. And it doesn't really matter what letter comes after the name, what their party is. I don't care. When it comes to this stuff, they've caused more harm than good. This goes back, again, to the 70s. My plate, the food pyramid, all that stuff. It's error after error after error. It's just bad, stupid nonsense that we see over and over again. And this is just, look at, again, take a look. Lucky Charms, better for you than ground beef? It's in the middle because it's got marshmallows in it. When you take those marshmallows out, there's really not a whole lot different between that stuff and the frosted mini wheats. And from a blood sugar response perspective, it might not be that different from the unsweetened almond milk that's there either. I have often said that, never on this channel, but I've often said that we're ruled by malevolent morons. They're we're not they're not the brightest bunch that we tend to send to rule us. And this is evidence of that. I mean, this either they're completely dumb or they're frankly trying to hurt people with this. Hey, at least a boiled poached egg though made the have it once in a while middle ground list, right? I'm curious how much longer you think people are going to put up with this stuff. How much, or how do you think people are going to actually see this and go, oh, yes, I'm going to eat all this kale and watermelon, and I'm going to only have skinless chicken breast once in a while? Or, ooh, ground beef, no more of that for me now because the government told me so. How much longer do you think? Or do you think things are kind of so bad out there on a lot of other issues that they're just not going to pay any attention to this? That they're just, I know carnivores are just going to sit here, we're going to have a laugh at this, although there are implications to this kind of terrible advice being continuously given out, especially when you consider the bigger picture of like nitrogen restrictions happening now with the Dutch and Canada, probably coming to America soon. When you take a look at that, you see this, you see other policies out there being pushed that are anti-food and by extension anti-human. When you see that stuff happening and you see this, kind of makes you wonder a little bit. So do you think people are going to put up with this? Do you think they're going to, you may think, well, they're not forcing anybody. Well, they kind of are, actually. They kind of are with their policies. They kind of are. When you look at the anti-food policies that are going on, when government takes action, that's a legal thing, and that becomes force. Doesn't matter who's doing it, whether you like the politician or not, otherwise on other issues. When they're doing it, it becomes force. And this stuff, it's going to hurt a lot of people if anybody pays attention to it. So I'm curious if you think anybody's going to bother paying attention to this nonsense, because at the end of the day, most people walking down the street, if you told them, hey, should you be eating a whole lot of chocolate-covered almonds or drinking a whole lot of orange juice? I think most people would say this stuff's probably okay for you, but not something you should have all the time, because most people don't know that much about nutrition. I mean, it's kind of telling. Most of the carnivore doctors and keto doctors out there admit that they had to teach themselves this stuff, right? They admit that. They had to teach themselves this stuff. So where does that leave the rest of us? The average person on the street. But I think the average person on the street knows orange juice is probably not something you should have that often. Have it when you go out for breakfast at a restaurant somewhere because you're having a nice time out. But otherwise, it's not something you should have. And that's not advice for carnivores. By the way, I'm not telling you to drink orange juice. But look, they put egg substitute fried in vegetable oil above a boiled or poached egg. It's well above a whole egg fried in butter. Think about that. This advice is madness. This is what we're dealing with. Food advice from people who should never be giving food advice. Makes you wonder what else they're wrong about. Anyway, let me know what you thought of this, what your reaction was when you first saw this chart floating around the internet. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Share this if you can on social media. YouTube loves that. And as always, thanks for watching today.